This is the CreaseCast.
Welcome to the CreaseCast, episode number 155. We'll try not to make it sound like episode 153 or 151 or 152 or 154 or any of the last 40 episodes of this season's CreaseCast.
Hey, now, the Canucks might be bad, but the quality of our content isn't.
No, of course not. We've got ideas and memes and jokes. We like jokes, but this one's a bit different because Lachlan and I don't want to say we're checked out, but the Canucks lost against the Chicago Blackhawks. Well, that was real. It's a real accent there. Did you hear me say Chicago?
I did.
I threw some Chicago.
I didn't catch it in the moment, but now I'm like, oh yeah.
I totally did. But anyway,
there we go.
It was very on brand. So 2 periods, they outshoot them 40-12 or whatever it is, and they still lose because for whatever reason, they take their foot off the gas, stop trying in the third period. Brandon Hagel tips a goal past Demko. Our resident Infinity Blocker wearer, he'd still get it this time as well. Maybe you give it to Connor Garland for being fun. But it's the same old, same old. Team isn't good enough. Team sucks. It's now a national talking point. Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick basically made it their entire intro today on 32 Thoughts. It was also a big feature in their podcast, the Jeff Merrick Show on Sportsnet 650. So what's there to add anymore? We can only talk about Pettersson's struggles so much. We can only talk about Thatcher Demko standing on his head as best as he can. We can only talk about the struggling power play, the struggling PK. What more is there to say? We're basically all just in waiting mode, memeing and laughing our little heads off at the dumb shit that happens during games. Part of that for me was photoshopping Connor Garland to be absolutely tiny at the side of Marc-Andre Fleury's crease and getting Tim Peel's approval, which was great.
That's right.
The Peel of approval.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is really cool. Like, again, I think you sent me a screenshot of that. I think just with the caption, "What an age we live in," and I was like, yeah, that really sums it up. The fact that, like, again, we've said a bit about Tim Peel in the past on this show. Not an insane amount because he didn't ref a single Canucks game last year. But like we've talked about the whole game management thing. We've talked about that stuff. So for us to get to a point where now not only is technically, I believe he is like a coworker of mine because he works for Daily Faceoff.
Yeah, that's right. So
I guess, technically we're coworkers, I guess. And then he's liking your tweets about Connor Garland being small. That is
a part of my brain was like, oh, this seems really inappropriate for a referee to be to liking memes about players. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah.
All right.
He lost his job in a very public and embarrassing fashion.
He was basically scapegoated for the league. Doing a piss poor job at running how they call penalties.
Yeah.
He's bad, but it's not it's not solely his fault.
Yeah, Tim Peel was always bad, but the one time he was caught being extra bad, that's when they decided to set an example, not for the
and when he was already
years and years of incompetence. Yeah, like just so dumb, man. This league is such a joke. But speaking of jokes, the Canucks, they did actually win a game this past weekend. I was not available to watch the game because of a wedding, a prior engagement. So again, shout out to our frequent listener. I had a great time. I had like 50 pounds of food for the dinner, and I got cut off at the bar, and it was an open bar, so it was a great time, man. I had a absolute blast, just dancing my little heart out.
What's your song? Cold. What's your song that you're dancing to out there? Like, what gets you going?
I don't really have a song at weddings, though. I do love, like, give me some shout. Like, I'm down for some shout. My buddy not the one that got married, but my other buddy, he loves the song "Sandstorm" by Darude.
Yeah,
and it is not a wedding song or a wedding dance song by any stretch, but you get that song blasting on speakers, and that guy just turns into a 13-year-old just having the time of his life. And so that was really great to see. Yeah,
that's great.
10 out of 10 wedding. And
we might have to send like a CreaseCast like wedding basket or something. We might have to do that.
A sweater and some socks and some stickers.
Yeah, hell yeah. Let's do that. Let's totally do that. And now that we've said it on the podcast, we have to.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I'm down for that.
Yeah. But they won that game. So you tell me how bad obviously it wasn't bad because they did win and they got out to an early lead. They didn't give up the first goal. By all accounts, like their power play was looking all right. Players were looking a bit better. It wasn't a moral victory. It was a legitimate regulation victory, which we have not seen many of from this team this season. So just your read on the game and your big takeaways.
Yeah, the game against the Jets, it was, it's coming off that really black eye of a game for the organization against the Avalanche. Not necessarily in the on-ice results, but in everything that went on around it. For the Canucks to come out with that performance in the first game against Winnipeg was very much needed for them. It was absolutely it was absolutely like a saving grace for them, especially going into what would end up being an absolute nightmare game against Chicago.
Yeah.
For them to, score the first goal of the game, for them to get a lead, never relinquish that lead. That was big. That was important for them. They needed that as a group to get that done. Of course, that doesn't factor in the fact of, hey, the Jets didn't look all that good. They were playing their second game in a back-to-back situation. They had their backup goalie in net. The Canucks did not take a single penalty, or were not called for a single penalty. Therefore, their penalty kill, their notoriously not great penalty kill, didn't get any opportunities to sort of redeem themselves in that game. And be a part of the solution. I guess if you want to look at a bright side of that particular game, the fact that they didn't get called on a penalty is kind of rare in today's game. It's rare to get not a single penalty, to draw not a single penalty in one game. That is kind of rare. So that's good. That is good. Like, discipline is important, even if your power play isn't historically bad. So that's something, I guess.
I want to piggyback off of what Via Saran said on the latest Roxy Fever episode with Justin Morissette as their full-time producer. Shout out to them, friend of the program.
Yeah.
But Via Saran he had this really funny comment where he's basically like, is it game management by referees to call penalties and not call penalties against the Canucks now? Because their PK is so historically bad that ignoring penalties is just as bad as calling penalties, because you're just guaranteeing a goal for a certain team. Like,
I didn't even think about that.
Because there were some plays where, like in the Colorado game, at least, when it was like relatively like close for them, like some parts, like there were calls that could have been made that almost weren't, because like you just felt like the refs were looking at this team going, like, this team can't kill a penalty, so if we call it, it's another goal against that they won't be able to come back from because they're that bad. So kind of like along the lines of, these few games this weekend were schedule wins, right? Like, you had Winnipeg, as you were saying, coming off of back-to-back. Chicago's coming off of back-to-back. They were exhausted as shit coming into Vancouver. So everyone had him down as a schedule win. So kind of like being called for penalties, like that's like the schedule loss. Like if someone gets called for a penalty, it's like, oh, well, that's a goal against. That's a scheduled goal against.
Yeah. It seems like it. I didn't even think about that aspect. I don't, knowing the NHL and their like the way that their game management operates, generally speaking, I could see a scenario where they're like, hey, maybe call less penalties on the Canucks so they're not a complete disaster and they look somewhat competitive.
Because the refs do have a room where they do like warm up or whatever, get their gear on and stuff. So like, they pregame and they pre-plan like stuff. So I'm sure it comes up like, hey, you kind of notice how bad this one team is at defending penalties. Like if we keep calling them, it's going to be like a 12-0 game, and then we're going to get Tim peeled for doing our jobs.
Yeah, I think though the thing with the game management though is right, like it's always about parity. Like it is always about parity, and knowing the NHL and the way that they tell the refs to do the way they want the refs to do their job, essentially. I think they would immediately be like, people would catch on immediately if the Canucks were like not getting called all the time. Like that's one of those things where people would catch on immediately. You can't really catch somebody on calling an equal number of penalties against both teams. Like you can, but like you're not gonna. It's not one of those things where people are like gonna be like, this is a like completely start like pull out the pitchforks, right? Because again, the NHL is one of those teams that looks at penalties as like, oh, if we call too many penalties on one team, even if they're a dirty team and play that kind of game, we're gonna be accused of fixing, of like trying to like rig games in another team's favor, which is I understand why that's their logic, but it's still incorrect. So I don't know. I mean, maybe like with the Canucks, that would be nuts and would be just a state of things. But I don't know. I think you'd have to look at the Coyotes on that then too, because the Coyotes are also very, very bad on the PK, and they're just bad in general. And maybe they're getting called on less. I don't know. Maybe there's a thread there you can pull at if you want to go and investigate penalties per game on those teams right now.
Well, Arizona and Vancouver next play on December 19th, and it'll be a Canucks home game. So maybe
I don't want to.
There's a lot of games from now until then.
That's
though,
true.
To be fair,
there's
this road trip where they play most of the Metropolitan Division, I think it is, like Pittsburgh, Boston, Columbus, and then some of the Atlantic teams as well. Like I think
Montreal and Boston, I believe, are coming up.
Yes, something like
that. There is a lot more teams that the Canucks have to lose to first before they lose to Arizona.
Exactly.
There's a lot more in between. Don't worry, guys. We're good.
Well, knowing the Canucks, though, let's be real, they're gonna go on like some heater where they win. Because remember, like Francesco Aquilini, or like the reports from the family are, they're going to take the next 8 or 9 games to determine what they're going to do with this management group, or what they're going to do with this team, because they're shocked at how bad they are. So knowing this team, after getting embarrassed by Anaheim, after getting embarrassed by Chicago, this is setting up for like, oh, we're going to win every road game, and then we're going to come home and win like 5 of 7. Or 3 of 5 or whatever it is, and everyone's gonna go, oh, all is well. This team knows what they're doing again. Let's trade our first and our second round picks for a better right shot defenseman. Like that's what this is all leading up to, and then they lose to Arizona like 7-0.
Oh,
Jay Beagle hat trick.
That would be impressive. I mean, I think, we're at the point here, clearly, like you go, okay, so we've talked about the Winnipeg game and just the Chicago game. Like I'm seeing a lot of people being like, including Travis Green, if you listen to his presser, being like, oh, we played a great game. We looked very good. We, the bounces didn't go our way. We had 40 shots on goal. And I'm just sitting here, like I watched the entire game. Okay. And yeah, they looked good at times. Yeah, they looked clearly much like way better than the Chicago Blackhawks did.
Mm-hmm.
But the Chicago Blackhawks, for one, or also coming off a back-to-back, the first game that they were coming off of which was in a different time zone against the Edmonton Oilers in a game where they got spanked 7-2. So they're not a confident bunch. They've also been dealing off the ice with the only off ice stuff more embarrassing than what the Canucks have been going through, where they're now they no longer have their GM, they no longer have their coach, They are in a complete just disarray organizationally right now in so many different ways. And there's no reason that they should win this game. There is 100% no reason that they should win this game. And the Canucks look at that and say, oh, let's see what we can do here. Like, oh, yeah, like, oh, there's no way the Hawks can win this game. I challenge accepted. And they blew it. Like, they completely blew it. I don't know how I don't know how you can look at a 1-0 loss to the Chicago Blackhawks, the current day Chicago Blackhawks, as any sort of success. Like, it like, people are saying, oh, moral victories. We are so far out of moral victories here. You have run out of options.
Yeah.
I would say, you know what, like, to quote a certain individual, they have run out of time when it comes to moral victories. It's one of those cases where, like, okay, if they had, let's say that previous to this, they had won, I don't know, let's be reasonable. Let's say 7 of 10. Not all their games, like 6 or 7 out of their last 10. A decent stretch where they have clearly won a lot of games and they are clearly in the hunt for things. If they come into it at that with that kind of a record and then lose 1-0 to Chicago, I think people would be still like, oh, of course they lost to Chicago because this is the Canucks. But people would be willing to give the benefit of the doubt a lot more because of the fact of, well, they had been good in the previous 10. They've been fine. Losing one game to a team they shouldn't is bad, but not bad enough that I am going to, like, lose my shit over it, kind of thing, right? Or I'm going to lose a lot of sleep over it. The Canucks came into this game, I believe, at 3-6-1. So, and then proceeded to lose again. So back to 3-6-1. It's not great.
No,
it's not great. Then again, it's the case of, you've completely run out of moral victories already. Like, you get a certain amount.
Like last year.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
every year you get like a certain number allotted, and then, like, for, like, let's say, like, I don't know, every like 4 wins or so, you maybe get one more added to the to the bar. It's like a gas tank almost. It's like a power bar essentially, where it's like Okay.
I have the perfect analogy for this. It's
All
like Mario Party when you find the green mushroom and you get another life added to your thing. Because you can be running along, doing the entire map. You can do, like, really well. Maybe you fall down a hole a few times. You sign a couple beagles, a couple ciders accidentally, and you got to restart, right? But then you accidentally hit one box, and you're like, oh, there's a green thing. So I get a little reset because maybe you went on a run. Like, you played really well in 12 straight games. You only won 5 of them, but you played your darndest, and that earns some, like, credit with the team. Like a Chicago game where you hit 5 posts, you had 40 shots in the first 2 periods. That probably earned a little bit of rope, just a smidge. No, maybe not enough for a full 1-up, but at least enough to give you some leeway for the next moral victory.
Especially because as you build up more coins, you like coins in Mario, you also get stars from, like, every 100 or something, or you one up mushrooms from every 100 or something. Another good way, like, actually, like, when you were saying that, the other analogy I thought of was, like, those arcade, when, like, arcades were big, and, like, you'd put your loony or your toonie in for the game, or, like, usually like a racing game, and it would be like, I got 60 seconds, and then every checkpoint you pass, you add maybe like 5-10 seconds onto the clock, and then it keeps ticking down. You're always and then once you run out of game over, you have to put in another $1 if you want to play. The Canucks are already at 0. They already ran out. They already ran out of their checkpoint moral victories.
The Canucks cashed out their admit one tickets at the thing,
Fun Park,
and they're sitting at the counter right now asking themselves if they want a mustache comb or a fake mustache.
I forgot it.
That's what they're trying to figure out.
That's a good reference. I love that.
Thank you.
Man.
But yeah, like, they really ran out of moral victories, like, last year, and the fact that, like you said, they're either 3-6-1, and we're like praising them for trying their hardest in a season when, like we said in our last episode together, the bar has been set by this management group that playoffs are the goal. It's to get there and see what happens. Well, now they're not going to be able to get there, let alone see what happens, at least with the way that they're playing right now, the inconsistency that they're playing right now. And I don't want to relitigate the same points that we've been making every single episode this season, because I'm sure it wears on you, the viewer, the listener. Check out our YouTube channel where you can actually view us in our our daily existence of misery and depression from
you sound like you're wrapping us up already. You're like, well, the show's over. Goodbye. What?
So anyways, check out our Patreon, guys. Make sure to subscribe.
Hang on. We got more to go here.
We got a lot to go through because we want to talk more about the NHL, because there's actually interesting teams to talk about. But
there's one other thing one other thing I wanted to ask you about. There's two things before we get into any NHL stuff. Because I forgot to add this to the sheet today, to our prep sheet today. But since the last time you were on, we did get a Jim Benning press conference, and we talked about it on the last show. Jacob and I talked about it on the last show. Go check that out if you want to. But since you weren't here for it, what sort of thing? Was there anything interesting that you wanted to maybe like quickly relitigate in that front? Because that is there were some interesting things in there.
There were some, if I'm being honest, but like it was such a predictable press conference because like we already knew the answers. Really, it's just about the issues with the Canucks branding or the messaging, right? Where you never know what they actually think. And coming away from that press conference, like the big takeaway was they asked Jim, did they put too much emphasis on the results of the bubble? And he said,
terrific question.
Which is a great question. And he didn't have an answer. He was like, I don't know. I don't think so.
Very telling.
Which is says it all, right? Like even back then we were like, are they going to think like, oh, us getting shelled for 7 games while Demko puts on a historically good performance? Are they going to look at that as, we're ready to push our chips all in? Or are they going to look at that and be like, oh, fuck, we are not even close to being ready? And the answer is right there. They still don't know why they got to Game 7 against Vegas, which is shocking because casual fans know exactly why they got to that point. The smartest of analytics people know exactly why they got as far as they did in the bubble. And this is the GM of the organization who, like, granted, sure, he's got a lot on his plate and he's not an articulate person. So maybe he didn't want to relitigate why or what his staff, like what their big takeaways were from the bubble. But the quick and short, dirty answer for him was just like, I don't know, whatever, which was,
I mean, it's unacceptable from an NHL GM, like for you to be like, oh, I have no idea what's wrong with this team. Like you can never say, I don't know. Saying I don't know as an NHL general manager making, I would assume, like obviously they don't disclose how much GMs make at the NHL level, but I think you can safely assume it's in the 7 figures.
Easily.
At least considering the amount of money that they're handing out on it.
Well, considering also what they negotiate for coaches these days, which is in the 6 figures, like there's no way he's, getting paid less to run the entire organization from a hockey standpoint to a business standpoint. Like that's still all under his control.
Right. And like even if it is, let's say it is like, even like just in the 6 figures, that's still like an insane amount of money for that kind of money. You cannot give answers where it's, I don't know. You have to be able to either even if you even if he just straight up lied and said like, yeah, I totally 100% believe that we didn't like overvalue the bubble kind of thing. Like even if he was just kind of like, even if he was clearly just telling like just being overly optimistic for the sake of not trying to give away the fact that he doesn't believe so, at least then it's an answer. At least that's an actual answer. I don't know is not a good enough answer. Quads had the great question of asking, oh, you said at the last time you did availability that one was also
shocking.
And he said, I'm not going to comment on that, which is, again, that's management speak for no.
Yeah.
I would say, Like there are certain phrases that GMs will use in particular, not like it's almost lawyer speak, but it's a bit different than that, just because again, lawyers are very much in the no comment to everything, even if it is like something that they could say yes to very easily. GMs always have like some tells in terms of things like reevaluate is a term that you will hear whenever you hear that come up. It means they've already actually made a call on it. Things like that. When they say I'm not going to comment to that kind of a question, that's their way of saying what the answer that you don't want to hear. It's always the negative answer.
Yeah, it's either like fuck you, I don't want to answer, or it's like I actually have changed my mind and my opinion, but I know if I answer with what I actually think, I'm going to get in a lot of shit, so I'm just going to plead the fifth and be like I'm not answering this.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to Quads. That question rocked super hard. And I didn't even think to ask that, or I wouldn't have thought to even bring up the 2-year plan thing. And the fact that he got like a no comment out of him was just chef's kiss. Like absolutely wonderful.
I literally texted him after that and just was like, holy shit, dude. Like,
yeah, I threw it in a chat I have with him too. I was like, Quads, you madman. Like it fucking amazing.
It was God, that was something else. And then we did get a listener question in. We got a listener question in today. About the Canucks and essentially where the players are at this point. Because I don't know if you've seen any like the videos from last night's game or like the post games. Oh, that's such
sad PD.
I feel so bad for the players. Like, I know that some of them aren't playing up to their potential and their quality that they should be. I know they're like not doing well, but like, and they're maybe not playing as hard as they could. But God, I just feel for them. I see the faces and I'm just like, oh, it's not management's fault. They pushed all the chips on the table for these guys. It's not these guys' fault that management pushed all the chips into the table on betting on them. Like I feel bad. I just feel bad for them because it's like you can't win for them. Like there's no winning for them here, right? Like,
and I'm sure there are things they really want to say too, where they're like I'm sure the players, it's like a catch-22, right? Like they appreciate playing for a team that does think you and your teammates are good enough to be a playoff contender, and that's why they're going all in and whatever. But there's also that inkling where they're like, well, hey, they went all in, but they spent all their money on a guy like, Tucker Poolman, who cannot handle the puck and is playing a shit ton of minutes with the team's best puck moving defenseman. And it kills all play in the offensive zone. And it happens every single game. So it's kind of like well, I appreciate that our GM wants to go all in and thinks we can do it, but I really hate the fact that he hasn't gotten us any help on the blue line. Like, yeah, I'm struggling. I'm Brock Besser and I'm playing like shit right now, but it's really hard when my D-men can't play with the puck and I have to compensate for that. Like, that's a big ask for a bunch of young guys who, I mean, they never had a good defensive core behind them. Like, I mean, the best defenseman before this was like, Chris Tanev, Edler, like stable, reliable vets who weren't the best puck movers, but they were good enough at this level that you could rely on them. And the downgrade has been like not even talked about nearly as much. I think we talked about it in our season predictions episode that kind of came out before the season started. Like we had a lot of doubts, and it's not going to get any better. Like if OEL's playing above average right now, like he's not going to keep getting younger and better. He's going to regress.
He's not gonna keep finding new levels to his game every season. What you're getting, the best you're getting out of him now is most likely the best you're gonna get out of him next year and the year after that. If he stays at that level, and if he's gonna stay at that level, you have to ask yourself the question: is that good enough? Is it good enough for him to be this good? Is this the bar that's good enough for him to clear? Because again, it's entirely based on the fact of how much he makes on his contract and his cap hit. But the answer would probably be no, just because of how much money,
just because of the deal. Yeah. Like he could be, what he is right now for the next 5 years, but for
Which is
$7.85 million, like you need so much more
Yeah.
out of
Again,
him.
yeah. And again, it's a case of like, if he were making way less money, you're totally happy with that production. You're like, this is great. Like, this is a perfectly manageable situation.
Yeah. If he was at $6 million, like if he was on the Edler deal or the Myers deal, I don't think anyone would really have a problem.
Yeah. And then you look at things like the Chicago game where let's not kid ourselves here. The one goal that went in that game, the Brandon Hagel goal, was completely Tyler Myers' fault. Like he screens his goaltender. He does not tie up Hagel's stick and completely like puts Demko behind the 8 ball. He can't do anything. There's nothing Demko can do on that play. And that was the frustrating part for me, is I literally was like I tweeted this during the game of like, you owe it to Thatcher Demko to get a point out of this game, considering even if maybe he hasn't been fantastic in the game, like necessarily like lights out amazing, because he hasn't had to be. This is a winnable game that you might actually have the shot of getting him at that point, prior to that goal, like a shutout. You had a chance to get him a shutout. Against the Black. And instead, it's Marc-Andre Fleury walking away with one because they couldn't get it done. And I just was like, how many times can Thatcher Demko stand on his head before he's like, I'm sick of putting this much effort in for a team that's not going to win me anything? Like, why am I wasting my prime years on a team that's like not going to, I'm literally like, it's blown saves. Like, I'm like out here doing my best and the team is blowing any sort of points away for me.
I was legitimately thinking about that exact same thing today at work. I was like, at what point does Thatcher Demko want out? You know what I mean?
First year of a 5-year contract. It's like one of those things where it's like, like how many times can a goaltender like it is a case of like, if anyone were to ask for a trade right now, it would be it. Like, let me be very clear. I'm not basing this on any sort of intel. This is just personal opinion of like, God, if you're Thatcher Demko, you're like, why am I wasting all of these really good games, like my best efforts, on a team that can't win it for me, that can't score? The 0 run support, you're not getting any. It's a case of like, for Demko, he's young enough that it's like, well, he'll probably have great seasons to come. Like, this is the start of like that. He's still on the uptick to better things, but you also have to ask yourself the question, well, what if this is it? What if you're Thatcher Demko, you're asking yourself, what if this is my best? What if this is my best year and it's about to get completely wasted on a team that can't win for me? When there are other teams that would kill for his services and would hand over the keys to the kingdom to get him. Like,
so this is what I was looking at after thinking about this earlier was, who is a California goalie whose contract expires after next year?
California born or California team?
California team.
John Gibson?
Jonathan Quick. LA is kind of on the up and up. They're playing very well. They've got, as we know, a prospect pool for days that they're loaded at center. They have defensive
Thatcher Demko
depth.
for Quentin Byfield. Who says no?
I'm just saying. Obviously, you're not getting Alex Turcotte or whatever for Thatcher Demko just because they're unproven, whatever, and it doesn't fit like the win. I mean, maybe it does fit the next regime's window where they say we're not competitive. We need to rebuild around, Hoglander.
It's gonna be like Drew Doughty.
Oh God. Oh, we trade Ekman Larson for Doughty. It's just constantly flipping money to be even worse and more.
Get even like an even more expensive guy.
Like,
your dad's making $11 million, is he not? Like, or am I nuts?
Yeah, he is.
11 million. He negotiated his own contract, which hey, I mean,
it works. Job. I mean, good for him. It's a bold move.
This one is, Google is very out of date and it says 6.7 million US, but from 2014. I would not. I mean, I wouldn't put it past the Canucks to be like, we traded Demko for Doughty and Joy. Is he a right defenseman?
Yeah.
Is he right?
because like if we're going down that train, like the train of thought of like, okay, Benning's out and
he shoots
the
right.
team is decided.
Oh no.
They're
gonna do it. But they're the Golden Knights, but they're the Golden Knights with forward, but instead of forwards, they're just acquiring mediocre, over expensive defensemen. Like instead of like Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty, Pietrangelo, Eichel, they're like, we're gonna create a murderer's row of 2012-2013. Like this is the all-star team from 2012. Like that is it. This is it. This is the group 10 years older. The dream team.
That's like if we're going down that train of thought, right? Like the next, like say the next regime says like, yeah, sorry guys, we hate to break, like they do the New York Rangers thing where they're like, we tried, but unfortunately there's going to be a lot of pain coming our way. We are going to have to rebuild, and you're going to see a lot of familiar faces traded away. Like, would Demko want to stick around through that? Because he's 25 right now, and this contract takes him till when he's 30 years old. That's going to be his prime years. Really.
100% his prime years. Goalies can age a little bit past the 27 curve, like 27-year-old curve. But
but usually it's that 30-year-old afterwards where teams are a little weary of signing goalies to big contracts, and especially now that you've seen guys like Martin Jones get bought out, like you've seen what's happened.
Sergei Bobrovsky's had a resurgence, but he's still a lot of money. But it's still considering what the first 2 years were, still a huge gamble.
Yeah, but if you're like Thatcher Demko, you're like, okay, I'm playing out of my mind. I'm playing in my prime right now, but there's still going to be that like asterisk, like, oh, we can't sign this guy to a bigger contract when he turns 30 until he turns 35. Like his next deal is probably going to be more or less kind of the same, maybe slightly more if some team like Buffalo or whatever goes crazy and overpays, but it's just like not going to happen. So
it's, you know what? It's a
tough
situation.
I hate to do this to you because obviously Thatcher Demko's your boy, your California kids, your goalies, they're the goalie brethren. Like it's tough to think of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're nearing that point where basically like everyone's getting out the armchair GM and going, what can the Canucks flip to try and salvage this decor? Because I don't know about you, man, but I don't ever want to see like Tucker Pullman for me is either trade him for a pick or buy him out at the end of this year. I don't want to see him again.
I'm straight up like I know it's not going to happen because again, the Canucks are so weak. But this
regime is stubborn, right? But maybe the next one,
won't be. Well, especially because it's not their guy. Like it's not their signing. It's not their, like I just, I'm at the point with Tucker Pullman in particular where I'm like, I never want to see you play again. Like you should be in the press box every single night, unless you should be you should not be playing on a nightly basis. He is an AHL player. Not good.
He makes like $1 million more than Troy Stecher, and he should arguably be playing less games than Troy Stecher's played this year. And Troy's played 6 for Detroit.
Tucker Pullman nearly cost them the game against the Jets because he iced the puck. He needlessly iced the puck in the last minute of play. Like, I think I literally tweeted or like DM'd you like, oh my God, he just iced it against his own team. Of course they're gonna, and luckily they didn't blow the game. But I was just like, literally, it was a case of like, oh, Tucker, you got all the time in the world. You got all the time in the world to skate it out. And instead he's like, I'm going to take a shot at the net and completely misses. And it's an icing call. And it's like, why? Like, why did you need to do that? You could have you had all the room to skate it out and move over the blue line. It is just, it's an abomination that that he is able to play top 6 minutes. I have a feeling based on your face right now that you might be seeing the thing that I was actually going to bring up. Because you have, and this is not news. It's just it's a thought process essentially.
It's the same speculation we're kind of going through the brain puzzles of what does this team do if they're presented with the opportunity to rebuild, and where would they do it? Please, this is from Mr. Benjamin Kuzma.
That is right. It is Benjamin Kuzma. When I pulled it up, it was 3 minutes ago. It's probably been about 10 minutes since we recorded now. Basically, to quote a little bit of the article, essentially, the Minnesota Wild are looking at trying to make a deal, or essentially like they're shopping around. And as normally, this is the case of like Brock Besser. This is talked about with Brock Besser, but in this article, Kuzma's article, quote, it's not Besser in the trade crosshairs right now. It's JT Miller the Wild have called about. The Wolves are always at the door and sensing that a wounded club may be willing to part with a frontline player if the return is right. And with the hockey operations department in turmoil as ownership ponders its next step, a trade might be a logical means to send a message. In a Miller acquisition, the Wild would likely dangle winger Kevin Fiala, 25, who has had ample opportunity to score, but has just 3 goals despite 58 shots, which speaks to his minuscule 5.1 shooting percentage. He's also in the final year of a contract that carries a $5.1 million salary cap hit. Kevin Fiala, JT Miller is an interesting thought process. Well, because again, here's the thing. A lot of people have been asking the like JT Miller question, including on Canucks Army. We've had a couple articles run, I believe, both by Stefan Roger, friend of the show, who basically like why have they not the Canucks should be looking at trading JT Miller at this point, not because he's been bad. He's actually been their best player. In a way that is the reason why that there is this idea of, if the Canucks are going to move anybody of value and somebody who might not necessarily be part of your long-term plans, it's got to be JT. JT Miller is the guy. And I don't know. I'm interested because Kevin Fiala was brought up on 31 Thoughts today as well about that whole situation. But but yeah, like that. I don't know what your initial thoughts on that as a potential deal. I'll tell you what I think after, but yeah, go for
it. It would be very on brand of Jim Benning and company to make a sketchy trade while under duress for a struggling winger in the hopes that he rebounds under their tutelage. That's been their MO for years, is finding the reclamation project and hoping for the best. But the wording around Fiala is very bizarre because it's not like he has gone the entire season without scoring. He has 12 points in 18 games. Like, he'd be like the 4th highest scorer on the Vancouver Canucks if he had that kind of production. But does it make sense? Like, obviously JT Miller is like a huge contributor to their penalty kill, to their power play, to 5v5. Like, he brings a lot to the table for them. And I don't know if Kevin Fiala brings that much utility to this club as a winger. And you listen to the 32 Thoughts where they basically talked about Fiala and how he's got like some ego and he didn't exactly gel with the locker room in Nashville. And that's kind of what played into him eventually being traded. So you kind of have to wonder, like, would you really want to part with a guy who so very clearly is like a key contributor to your lineup this season of all seasons, for a guy who might not be a good fit for your club's utility or even just like in the locker room as well? Maybe next year I would like venture the idea of trading JT Miller, but like right now, while the team is struggling the way it is, it seems kind of brash, and you're probably getting a lot less value than you would if you were trading him when he was, I don't know, on a winning team or something. Like, I don't know. It just seems like a bit, I don't know, like a bad idea to me. But granted, it's also a bad idea is holding on to JT Miller and not making playoffs the next 2 years, and he walks away as a free agent and you get nothing for him. So maybe in that case, yeah, sure, why not trade him? Trade him for Marco Rossi. Get that kid on board. I'm down with that.
That'd be cool.
It would never happen, but
Yeah. Here's the thing. Here are the two things. Let's put aside the actual what this trade could mean for the team. For a second, from the on ice perspective, my thought process is right now, based on all the conversations we've had about management in the last week or the last 2 weeks, really, but is that if a trade is made, if the Canucks make any sort of trade, I don't care who it is, like with the exception of maybe like, I don't know, like a small AHL deal or a short, like, or something like where it's like depth, just swapping depth pieces with some other team. If they're allowed to make a trade, if this management team is allowed to make a trade, it means that the Canucks are that ownership and are not doing their due diligence, and they're essentially either they're planning on keeping the management team they already have, one that today there was stuff coming. Elliot Friedman talked about how there are people already kind of choosing sides on there's like so factions good. Building, which is
such a good building, sign.
Which is, again, very healthy. You're running a very healthy operation as a franchise when the people in your front offices are literally picking sides. That's always turns out very well. Definitely doesn't lead to a coup at some point. If they're letting them make trades, either they're planning on keeping a management team that has already fractured the franchise to a point that of potentially no return, like there's no fix for, or at the very least, they are letting a management team that's already on its way out the door further hamper or further affect the plans of the next people to come in. So I'm like, if you're ownership, there is no, like, I don't care. I frankly don't even care if if Jim Benning comes to you and is like, we got the Oilers to trade us Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl straight up for JT Miller, and that's it. Like, I'm still like, now hold on, I'm not letting you sign a damn thing because because I clearly don't trust you. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, what's the catch on this? What else did you move, Jim? It's one of those things where it's like, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, chances are Jim Benning is not going to be the GM who has to deal with this in the next, say, at least probably next year, considering the opt-out on that contract, or at the earliest, it might even be next week. Like, it could just as easily be next week. You can't let him make any roster decisions that aren't already within your system. If you're doing so, you're further affecting who might be coming in to replace him at some point from doing their job. And being like, well, I would have liked, and then coming in being like, well, I would have liked to have still had JT Miller to move myself. It was kind of the same thing when Mike Gillis traded Luongo, literally like a month before he was on his way out. Now that trade turned out pretty well for the Canucks with Jacob Markstrom.
That buoyed the Benning regime for the last 7 years, basically, or 6 years.
Yeah. But at the same time, one of the few betting decisions that I was like, oh, this is actually a good, was 100% like, nope, this is a good call, was when they signed Ryan Miller after that, because it was like, well, we don't have a goalie right now, and it would have been nice to have still had Roberto Luongo at our disposal. Again, it turned out fine in the end. At the end of the day, it was probably the right call. It was the right call, but still, it was one of those things where it was like, the last GM made a decision that basically the next GM in kind of had to undo, in their own way, in a sense.
It didn't really work out though. With
Markstrom,
because what they get?
They got very good hockey out of Jacob Markstrom, right? Like that, and then that transitioned into Thatcher Demko. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
you got no. You didn't.
You got no.
Yeah,
you got no.
And you didn't get any assets out of him either.
But in terms of if you had kept Luongo, for example, you probably weren't gonna get that either, because of how bad the team in front of him would have been. But also,
you might have escaped a recapture penalty.
That's true. God, that is true. But again, Benning couldn't do anything about that.
Well, he could have if he was a good fucking GM. Could have been on the phone with Florida and been like, "Hey, trade me this guy so I don't get screwed."
That would have been smart. I'm getting off topic here. And then the other thing, and again, now ignoring that part that I just taught, the whole management part of things. From an on-ice perspective, I don't see what flipping, like, as good as Kevin Fiala is, like, and we saw him in the bubble a couple of years ago, how just absolutely great he is at hockey. If moving him doesn't fix any of your problems, like flipping JT Miller for Kevin Fiala literally is just shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic in a way, especially if he's got one less year of term on his contract. Like,
it does not address any issues with the club. Like I said, you need to revamp this entire decor. That's why Thomas Strantz was talking about it on the Canucks Hour this morning. Like does Tyler Myers have value, and could you get something out of him? And that's kind of,
there are definitely some teams that would look at him and be like, this is a decent third pairing. Like, if you retain some salary maybe for this year, there's a third pairing option here for sure.
Yeah, if you're this team, like, and you're Benning or whoever, and you're going to ownership being like, yeah, we have a trade for JT Miller. It doesn't address any of our current needs, but it might work out in the next couple of years. Oh, and you need to re-sign the guy to another extent or contract after we acquire him. They're going to be like laughing him out the door. Like, it just doesn't tick any boxes for them. And like I said, if you lose Miller off your PK and as oh my god, what are they called? Face-off guy. Like, oh my god, this team might like bottom out even further somehow and be in contention for Shane Wright. Like, that's what we're talking about here, so that they could, I don't know, salvage a trade that was made aggressively after a season in which they had no business trading away a first-round pick to acquire players to go all in. And those kinds of shortcuts they can't be taking. And I don't know if Fiala is a shortcut or if it's, like you said, just shuffling deck chairs on a Titanic, but it's something that this management group they shouldn't be afforded that ability to do so. So hopefully cooler heads will prevail. Also, the Minnesota GM or the scouting director is Judd Brackett, who is very familiar with John Weisbrod and Jim Benning. And I'd be a little worried about trading my star winger / centerman / really angry guy on the ice who is a leader in the dressing room. I'd be a little worried about trading that guy to a team that just had a killer draft and has a guy who obviously harbors a grudge and would be loving the ability to make his former bosses look absolutely stupid in a trade for someone. So I think it was Drance this morning talking about, or sorry, maybe it was Roxy Fever talking about trading Gustav Forsling for Adam Clendenning, and how when it comes to player evaluations, that if Stan Bowman is offering you like some established NHLer for some prospect who's never played a NHL game but had a really good World Juniors, part of your brain should have been like, hey, maybe this guy's trying to fleece me and I should double check before I agree to this trade.
Yeah,
and that of course never happened, and that needs to happen for this JT Miller proposition that's coming out.
Yeah, there are certain GMs. Like not like ignoring again, putting aside Jim Benning specifically, poor trade record over the years. Like any general manager, there are certain other GMs that if they're calling you, do not pick up the phone. Like, or pick it up and just do not call and just hear what they have to say and then be like, cool, bye. Like, and that's
smile and nod, just like, oh, thanks for the call.
Literally, like, who they're interested. If they tell you they're interested in a player, you should be like circling it and being like, okay, this guy's gonna be good. Write that down.
This guy's either gonna be good or he's gonna have a lot more value than we think we should get. We should do our due diligence
for him right now. Exactly. Yeah. Like if Steve Yzerman calls you, if Julian Brisebois in Tampa calls you, like if like I'm just trying to think like who else might be on that list right now. Joe Sakic's probably on that list as well. Like there are lots of teams where it's there are quite a few teams where it's like, okay, anytime they call you, you hear who they want, and then you make that player and then you make sure you keep to hang on to that player for dear life because they're probably going to be really, really good. The one last question before we get into NHL stuff. This was a listener question from @SanjBot. Does this Canucks roster need 2 players to have a practice scrap like Kessler and Mitchell attempted to scrap in 2009? And if so, who would those 2 players be? I actually didn't remember this. So I do have the YouTube clip pulled up here that I think I can get. I can pull up pretty quickly on our YouTube, on our video stream here in a sec if you give me some time. But what do you think? What's your thought here?
I mean, I kind of see what he's going for. He's thinking, I'm sure he's thinking of like the St. Louis Blues thing. Like they had that very publicized fight at practice, and then they went on their giant tear, and then they won their cup. So I'm wondering if that would be a good idea, but it wouldn't, because the Canucks, as we know, are prone to injuries. And I would not be shocked in the slightest if, say, Tyler Mott got in a fight with, I don't know, who would he get in a fight with? Connor Garland or someone else like Travis Hamonic? Like,
and then the video right now, I'm seeing like Kessler and Mitchell just like holding arm in arm. That's pretty great.
The whole thing.
That's pretty great.
It would be very like on brand for the Canucks to have like this fight at practice, and Tyler Mott goes out with a concussion, and then the other guy breaks his hand.
That would be.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't serve any purposes, and like screw fighting with each other. Like they just need to play better. Like what is fighting in a practice going to do for each other? You know what I mean? Like, sure, it shows you're passionate, but like most hockey players are passionate about winning. That's why they play in the NHL.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see if I were going to go with a funny answer here. I mean, I would think it would have to be Connor Garland and Tyler Myers. That's the winner. That's clear.
Tyler Myers doesn't fight though. Remember it was like a shock when he did fight that one time?
Yeah, he's not bizarre. A fighter.
Yeah.
God no, he's not a fighter because that's not he's not his thing. But that exactly all the more reason it would be funny if you just had the tallest guy on the team up against the shortest one in Connor Garland. That would be spectacular. Okay, here's the thing. If that happened, the Canucks might have such a good laugh out of it and like be like, oh, this is the funniest thing this is such a funny moment that this might galvanize them to do a lot better. Like just in that like
they remember that hockey's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, a little bit. Like that might be it. Because it is, but like what was the thing we talked about all the time when it came to why the Canucks did so well in the bubble, like in terms of like not just being opportunistic, but the fact that they were a team that looked like they were actually having a damn good time playing. Mm-hmm. And again, like a good mentality, it can't get you everywhere. Like you can't win a championship off of just a good mentality and positive vibes. Yeah. But you can get a lot farther off of it than people think.
Yeah. It helps.
Just positive thinking goes a long way in terms of just like keeping the mood light, especially in the cases where it's like, oh, your back's against the wall at a bad time and you need to get out of it. Having the positive attitude to be able to go into those situations and not let it get to you is so helpful and so good for a team to have. So, hey, maybe Connor Garland versus Tyler Myers, the Elf versus the Chaos Giraffe would turn everything around and win them, and it would be the thing that takes them into a championship right there.
Give me Quinn Hughes versus Elias Pettersson, no holds barred. The friendship is off. Get him scrapping. That's what I love to see.
I'd be like, oh my God, don't break it. They somehow both like they both connect at the same time. Like it's like they both connect almost like they're doing like the like ring, like a ring thing where it's like the, like where it's like, oh, you connect the rings, the power thing. Like that's a very like superhero esque thing, and they just both shatter their hand. It's like, oh, there's the entire season right at that moment.
Yeah.
And then you just like, it just cuts to like a whole like the shot of like from the superhero video where like the outside of the arena is in ruins, and it's like,
Yeah.
oops.
Oh,
God,
wow.
that if anything out of that Avengers video is not gonna age well, it's that one. Those beginning clips where literally Vancouver looks like it's a smoldering like
I mean, it kind of didn't age the second it was put out because of the fact that it invited people to make riot jokes, because that's what the outside of the arena looked like. So
yeah, straight up. That was
a
a
bold move.
That particular thing, that particular aspect of it was an odd choice. The rest of it was fantastic.
Yeah, sure enough. All right, let's get into some other stuff.
Some
non-boring Canucks news. I thought we were gonna have like 10 minutes to talk about them and just be like, all right, let's talk about anything else.
I thought we'd get
pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, you know what? We found a way to talk about the Canucks in a way that isn't just the same old, same old. And part of that is just because of the fact that they're at a point where something's got to give. What a movie. They're at a point where like eventually something's going to have to change, whether that's your management, whether that's your players. They're going to do something. And yeah, so we found a way to talk about that, albeit it still doesn't give me much hope that things are going to get better. But hey,
no, it's not in the slightest.
Something.
Yeah. Anyways, let's talk about Calgary for a brief moment. First in the Pacific, 11-3-5. They have more shutouts than the Canucks have actual wins. I'll answer second, but for you, do you actually buy what's going on in Cowtown right now, or do you think it's like a house of cards?
So if you've been a listener, like a regular listener of the show before, you'll know that I'm somebody I've not been sold on the Calgary Flames for a very long time. And honestly, that's kind of still the same. Like I'll say this, I think they're better than I anticipated. Especially defensively, they've been much better than anticipated. And again, like part of the reason we're doing like again, you and I were like of the mindset of going into the show that we were going to talk about the Canucks for maybe like 10-15 minutes and then go into the rest of the NHL, because frankly, we haven't spent that much time on the other teams in the league. And there are some things that we were looking at the standings and we're like, oh my God, this team's doing really well. And then you'll like Calgary being one of them is like, I assumed that Edmonton was still firmly in the driver's seat and they had first place. But yeah, Calgary's passed them, not by a big margin, only by 1 point in 2 more games. But still, I was kind of like, that's shocking. And then you get into the whole fact of they've gotten 7 shutouts in their first 19 games. That is,
and not just from one goalie,
not just from Jacob Markstrom, who has been again phenomenal. They're getting them from Darth Vader, aka Dan Vladar, as well. It is just they're cooking with gas right now. But again, I still feel like eventually they're gonna fall to earth. Like I don't buy them being this good. I don't know about you. Like
I'm in the boat of Daryl Sutter teams always play really good defensively and are like a really low-key great analytics team. Like there's that one tweet from Jay Fresh where he's like, all Daryl Sutter teams are historically incredible analytics teams when it comes to goals for percentages, Corsi for percentages, expected goals metrics. Like they're always like incredibly good in the analytics department. And he gets like a bad rep because obviously he's like a gruff, old school, old guy, always comes off like he's pissed off. But this is a good sign that Jacob Markstrom isn't being run into the dirt, which was what we were concerned about last season when he played like 17 games straight and then fell off the edge, and then Calgary just like imploded on themselves. Here now, his backup isn't Dave Riddick, who is either hit or miss. He's getting shutout performances from Dan Vladar, which I want to say is also a testament to the fact that the Calgary Flames are playing just really good defensive hockey. that they can provide good performances in front of both Markstrom and Vladar. They have trust in both of those guys. Johnny Gaudreau's bounced back. Matthew Tkachuk's still really good. Rasmus Anderson's really good. Chris Tane's playing really good. Like it, I know that all the memes back when Calgary signed all of the Vancouver UFAs, and it was just like, oh, they're trying to be Vancouver. Ha ha. They're too late. Now they're getting the old versions. But now you're watching it and you're kind of like, hey, wait a minute. Maybe they had the right idea and they actually picked the most important guys to grab from the Vancouver Canucks in Tanev and Markstrom.
Oh, okay.
Not Josh Levo. Josh Levo was clearly not the.
I mean, I was thinking like, if you're talking about Eric Goodbranson here and
Brad
Brad Richardson, like, yeah. That's the thing. See, this is where I differ on them. So like Sutter, like you mentioned, Sutter's teams are analytically very good. I would also say Sutter's teams are also generally very dependent on having a solid goaltender, because the Kings teams that underperformed were always the ones where either Jonathan Quick got injured midway through the year or he just wasn't playing at his best. They're a team that really loves defensive hockey. So if your goaltending is struggling, you're going to have a hard time. But yeah, right now they're doing Sutter is often like ran goaltenders a little bit into the ground as well, which was why I was very worried about him coming into Calgary. I was like, God, no, Markstrom's going to get way too many games. Dan Vladar's played more games than Jarro Halak has this year so far. He's played 5 games. He started 5 games. And he has a .946 save percentage and 2 shutouts. That is insane.
Right.
That is absolutely nuts. And Jacob Markstrom, for his credit, 5 shutouts, a .942 save percentage, a blip under in 14 games. That is just insanity. But yeah, the one thing that where I see flaws in the plan in terms of like, are they totally for real here, is the fact of, like we mentioned, Eric Goodbranson plays regular minutes on their defense. Nikita Zadorov plays regular minutes on their defense, and he is notoriously not very good defensively as well. He's a bit of a Tyler Myers, albeit a bit like a younger version.
Yeah.
He's in terms of just like what he has potential. Now, I believe he's injured right now. Or no, is he not injured? Is he even, because I'm looking, wow, he might be scratched. They might have scratched him. Because
I don't think he's played a single game this year.
Zadorov hasn't played a single
game. No, I'm thinking of Brad Richardson.
Brad Richardson has played. He has 2 points. He has only a few games. He's only played a few games. But he has 2 points. I believe both in the same game. Like his first game with the Flames, he got 2 points, including a goal. And I was just like, oh my God. Oh yeah, both of his are goals. Yeah, he got 2 goals in the one game against I believe against the Rangers. He's played 10 games. He's played a good amount.
Okay.
Since I last at least paid close attention to the Flames. Zadorov is the interesting one, because I don't believe he's played 13 games, but right now he is if you look at their defensive pairings, on at least on daily faceoffs, it's Noah Hannafin and Rasmus Anderson is your first pairing. Your second pairing is Oliver Shillington, who's been
very good and was on waivers at last year, and nobody picked him up.
He was exposed. Seattle should have. Again, another case one of those cases where I was like, God, I don't know. Like, I don't know why the Kraken took Giordano, 1 year of Giordano over a potential good amount of Oliver Shillington. Like, he's very good. He's very underrated. But it took him a while to crack the Sutter lineup. From what I heard, Sutter didn't like him at the beginning. He wasn't a big fan, but now he's playing regularly.
I feel like he's kind of like that Troy Stetcher mold, where it's like the coach had to warm up to what he actually offered. And we all know Travis Green did not ever warm up to Troy Stetcher, but he reluctantly had to, because he was the best right shot defenseman that he had on the team. Shillington was on waivers, I think January of last year. And I remember so many people in the Vancouver market were like, you need to pick this guy up. His underlying numbers are so good. He would be a great fit. He's cheap. Like,
I saw him play quite a few
completely free pickup.
So, I saw him play quite a few games for the Stockton Heat back in the day, and he was always stuck out when he was out there. on the ice. Like he was clearly at the point in his career, and this was 3 years ago or more, maybe now, like might have even been, this is 4 seasons ago, where it was like, okay, clearly he doesn't have much to learn at the AHL level, but he's also just not yet there for the NHL. Now he's got 12 points in 18 games, and he's there, and he's 5th in team scoring. Like, that is a very good team. But again, my worry, and then you have Chillington with Tanev, and you have Valimaki with Goodbranson. My biggest worry there is just like, I don't know how long the defense can keep that up. Is that wrong? Am I wrong for thinking that way? Like,
no, it's completely fair.
Yeah, but overall, like, their forwards look a lot better. Blake Coleman, for the amount that I think they overpaid on him in the long term, he's done very well for them in Calgary so far. They're a good looking team. I don't think they're this good. Like, I don't think they're division champions good. But I do think right now they're boding well in the sense of like, they're playing their goalie's a healthy number. They're not like running Markstrom just like full speed ahead 20 straight games.
They're not killing him already.
Which is what doomed them last year when they were playing well. They're not doing that. They haven't panicked when it comes to the whole like Matthew Tkachuk thing. In terms of like where they basically are like, okay, we're picking between, is this Johnny Gaudreau's team or is this Matthew Tkachuk's team? And I think Matthew Tkachuk's your number one guy. But at the very least, they've kept both of them, and they're better off for it right now. And I think Calgary is going to be. I don't see Calgary necessarily as a cup contender yet, but like I see them as they're going to do. I think they're going to fall to earth a little bit, but that's still going to be a playoff team.
Yeah, hard to imagine them slipping. The amount of levels they would need to fall out of playoffs right now in the Pacific Division, just because they're, like you were saying earlier, like there's such a clear like gap between the top of each division and the bottom, and I mean I'd be shocked if they dropped from where they are right now into the bottom of the heap. It would have to be like we were saying last year, like it would take Markstrom injury. But I mean, that we say that, but then Dan Vladar's like actually been like really kind of low key awesome. So that is true.
But if you have to go to Dan Vladar and say, okay, we need Markstrom's hurt, we need you to play 5 in a row versus 5 over a course of 19, are you going to get the same results out of him? I would say probably not.
Yeah.
But because again, right now it's the perfect balance. Like they're getting that perfect balance of they're playing their backup goalie on a comfortably regular amount of games. Yeah. But they're not, but not to the point where it's taking away from how many your number one guy is starting, and you're getting the best results out of both of them. Mm-hmm. And so again, you might be right. Maybe if Markstrom does have an injury scare, which let's be honest, that's likely with Markstrom. He's had a lot of them over. Like he usually has one injury a year, at least in recent times.
Yeah.
But. And if he does, you might be right. Vladar might be able to hold down the fort and do just fine. We shall see. I think they're setting themselves. They're like the Canucks are doing so in the opposite direction, where they're really setting themselves up for not making the playoffs in terms of just how bad the start has been. The Flames, at the very least, even if they kind of level off a bit, are setting themselves up in a spot where it's like, well, we built the cushion. We're not worried about potentially falling out of the race here necessarily, unless we're, again, historically bad, which I don't see that team turning into.
Yeah. Only the Canucks can be historically bad this season in the Pacific Division, especially with the way their penalty kill's going. So do we want to get into the New Jersey Devils jersey?
Sure. Let's do it. We don't talk enough about jerseys on the show, in my opinion. I feel like
it's because we get so little like new ones every year. Like obviously we had the reverse retro stuff that came out, but that felt like the first.
You were not here for that, and you were technically, when those got announced, that was like one of the 4 episodes I did before you joined the show. So we didn't even get a chance to do like a big ol' episode.
Yeah, we just got to talk about how they looked when they were finally revealed on the ice,
and how they looked losing every game wearing them.
Which is too bad, because I stand by the fact that the Canucks versus retro wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad. It was just unoriginal. That's my take on it.
It looks crappy in pictures, but on ice and like in person, like the jersey.
It looked
slapped.
okay with the navy helmets and the navy gloves and the navy pants. Like it looked okay. It did well. But again, I quibbled with the fact that they were like marketing it like in the teasers as like a green jersey, and I'm like, nope, this is a blue. This is another blue jersey with green accents. Don't lie to me and tell me this is green. This is not a green jersey. But I mean, at least it wasn't the Devils jersey that they put out this week. That was really rough.
So I have some thoughts on this because obviously the Winnipeg Jets threw out their alternate, which was the typeface Jets in cursive in like weird sky blue colors. Like it doesn't match anything in their history or their system. This is more of the same. Like this looks like a beer league jersey that someone from Jersey designed, and I hate it so much. It is so stupid and ugly. It looks like a Blackhawks practice jersey skin with the jersey typeface on it.
So you know what you're thinking of, and I believe if I click on this tweet, in the replies you'll see it, is this jersey.
Yes.
From the Winter Classic a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's like the exact same.
The Blackhawks wore a black and white jersey for their games, literally right down to the striping on the arms. Look at this. Look at that. Look at that. It's
like
two big
literally the same
bars, with 3 little bars in between. It's the exact same striping. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I encourage you to go check it out. Yeah, it's literally a black jersey with 3 stripes on the shoulder, 3 big white stripes on the shoulders, 5 white stripes on the arms, a small white band on the bottom. The rest is completely black with a script in black, in like a white script with like red accent that says Jersey on it for New Jersey. It's
in
the
case
Jersey
you didn't
jersey.
know.
And God, like it's like, so they did one of those things where they're like, no, but guys, this is actually based on like hockey history, which so it's supposedly it's based on this team from the like 1920s. It's a team called the Newark Bulldogs that played in the area. And to be fair, it does look like that. Like it does look like kind of like that, but the script doesn't match for starters. And also, you're the New Jersey Devils. You have a really cool logo. You have arguably one of the cooler logos in hockey. Like, put aside just looking at the logo itself objectively, it's a nice logo.
It's
that
clean
NJ
and clever.
Perfectly
simple.
You're exactly right. It's a perfectly simple jersey. It's one of those things, like, I think the best logos in sports, I don't know if you're on the same thought process as me here, Cody, but I often think like the best jerseys and logos in sports are often the ones that don't necessarily give away that they're associated with that sport. Like the Canadiens logo, the Leafs logo, the Rangers logo, and basically any original 6 logo, the Devils. Right. Like the fact that there's not a hockey stick in any of them. There's not a puck or something. Like I think those logos often are the most timeless and classic, and the Devils are one of them. And they could totally, that branding is so great. And they're like, here's a black jersey that just says Jersey on it. Why? Why would you do this? Why do they constantly pair a really decent logo with terrible, boring ass jerseys? They do this all the time. Like their Christmas jerseys are their best ones. And even those are like, it's like, okay, it's a red jersey with red, with green and white striping. That's it. It's not like that out of the box thinking. Some of the designs, like the concepts that people came up to in the response to this one, like one where it was just the NJ in red with a full black jersey around it, like not even like no circle, like the NJ Devil logo is in a white circle with like a black outline. They take out the circle in the outline, and it's just that devil, that N and J on a full black jersey with like some red stripes. That looked awesome. And it's like, why didn't you go with that? Like that would have been one of the best third jerseys in the league. Instead you went with this.
Yeah, I mean, That usually happens though whenever a team announces like a new jersey, right? Someone always comes out with like a way cooler one in the replies, and then it pisses off everyone because they're like, "Wait, I want that. I don't want a jersey that says Jersey on my jersey." And
Yeah. I
such
don't
is
know.
life, though.
NHL teams would do themselves like a real solid, or like if they were like, we're gonna do like a fan design uniform where it's like, hey, we're
A
gonna
vote,
specifically
if you will.
no votes, no votes. Here's the thing: if you vote, if you're like, I'm no social media expert by any stretch, but if you're a professional organization, never leave things up to like a vote unless you have a very set like
Are you
2 or
kidding?
3.
The New Jersey McJersey faces. That's a jersey you can
This
get behind
jersey is absolutely the one that would win a fan poll because people would just stuff the
because it
box with
sucks.
these because it's
Yeah,
so bad. I was saying to you before the show that I was like, if they're gonna do this jersey that says jersey on it, they need to commit to the bit and have stickers on the helmets that say helmet. The hockey pants need to have pants on them. Like they commit to if they commit to the bit, I would like this jersey.
yeah,
If
I agree.
other than that, it's crap. It's a crappy jersey. It's not good. It's not good
Yeah.
in any way.
Sometimes the best thing you can do is just to commit to how shit your jersey is, and until they do that, this one will remain a big fat L for us.
Yep.
All right. Last little one thing here. Apparently, the Penguins are being bought by Fenway Sports Group. Mario
Rumor
Lemieux
is,
will
yeah.
still keep minority ownership status.
Oh wait, is this coming out more? Like, is there more? Has more dropped on this?
That's what I read in the initial report, was that the idea
Okay.
is that Fenway Sports Group would be buying like the majority stake, but Mario Lemieux would still somehow retain minority ownership to the point where he'd be, I guess, still in charge of like the team or
It's
what
probably
have
like a
you.
case where it's like, in a way, it's almost like it's not so much that they're buying the Penguins as it is maybe that they're merging with the Penguins, essentially, where it's like Lemieux technically is now an owner of Fenway Sports Group rather than the Penguins, than Pittsburgh, whatever their like parent company is called, right?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, so Fenway also owns the Boston Red Sox in Liverpool. And apparently, like on Saturday night, Hockey Night Canada was talking about how apparently at one point they had approached the Leafs, like MLSE, about merging with them instead. And doing like a thing where they now own, because they don't own a basketball team or a hockey team or anything else. So it would be, in theory, the Leafs would be owned by the Boston Red Sox, and it would be like this whole, like, just the amount, and the Raptors as well, like the Raptors, Scotiabank Arena, Toronto FC, like all those would be all under one big Boston-based parent company, which would be great for the memes.
They would probably, like, I imagine the Major League Baseball organization would put a stop to that though, because Fenway Sports Group would not allow, or sorry, the MLB would not allow one ownership committee to own two separate major league teams though. Like, the Jays are owned by MLSE and Sportsnet or Rogers or whatever, right?
Here's how it works. It's a little complicated, but basically every team except the Blue Jays in Toronto, like every major team in Toronto, is owned by MLSE, which is 50% owned by Bell and Rogers, which is why both of them get 41 games of the Leafs and the Raptors schedules on TV every year. The Blue Jays, though, are owned by Rogers outright. Like they're the sole owners of that team. So in theory, so the Jays would not be a part of that. There are rules where I believe I don't think it would factor in this case because there's no NFL teams involved. But like I know in the NFL there is a rule where you cannot be owned. Where if you're an NFL owner, you cannot own any other teams in the in North American pro sports. Like your name cannot. It's one of those stupid things where it's like, oh, I'm just transferring ownership over to my wife or my kid. And the other things. So it's not really. It's a very stupid rule. Like for example, Stan Kroenke, the very dislikable owner of the LA
totally
Rams.
cool dude.
Yeah, totally cool dude. In so many ways now. He owns the Avalanche. Like the Kroenke Sports owns the Avalanche, the Nuggets. As well, but technically those teams are owned by his son or something. Like there's there's a thing in there where that the Pepsi Center, all that stuff in Denver is technically owned by his son or his wife or something instead. But yeah, in this case, I don't know. How do you feel about like this is because this is kind of a new thing where like ownership is done where like where like the ownership group owns teams in different locations in different sports, and it's like almost like it's a very different thing. It's often like a case of like, oh, like with MLSE, it's one company owns all the local sports teams. They're all together kind of group. It's different that there are now teams like that. There's situations like this where they own a team in Boston, they own a team in the UK, and they own a team. They potentially might be owning a team in Pittsburgh. Is that weird? Like, is that weird to you at all?
No, that's fine with me. Yeah, localized ownership, like I think, is actually damages like a team's ability to actually be bigger than what they are. Like because,
Really?
like, say for example, like you wanted to have a team in Halifax, right? Like you could have an NHL team in Halifax if you had an ownership group in Houston willing to put it in Halifax. But for
Yeah,
whatever
like if they're
reason,
willing to lose
they
like a
always
bunch of money
want,
on it, yeah.
yeah, they base so much of it on what's the local corporate sponsors only. They don't like they tunnel vision on, what's available locally to sponsor the team rather than just like, hey, if I'm a multi-millionaire in Houston, uh I don't really care. I'm gonna make money just because Canadians love hockey, and I'll figure out the corporate deals later, but I'm gonna own it from my beautiful summer home in Texas.
That
Well,
might be the way in for the Nordiques, like, because I mean that's been
that was
talked
also
about
reported. Yeah.
that they want that they're talking about the Nordiques. Although of course the NHL doesn't want to expand right now. 32 is
32
healthy,
is a
so
good number.
it would have to be a relocation, right? Like most likely, if anyone is moving, it's Arizona, and even then, it's kind
Why?
of
They're
like
having such a good season.
they're having such a good season and are
They're killing
totally
it.
not on the way of getting kicked out of their building at the end of the year. Um,
Yeah, what a
yeah,
way to like convince like the building, like the property managers, like anyone in
please,
Arizona, like,
please
hey,
let
we
us
care
stay.
about, yeah, like we
Please let
care
us.
about you guys as our fans. We care about putting like a good
We're gonna
product on the ice. So
we're
we're
gonna
gonna intentionally tank for a whole season and give you the most unwatchable shit
we're
you've
gonna
ever seen.
we're gonna intentionally tank and then ask you to let us stay for another year or so while we build a competing arena, like, oh, half
Yeah.
an hour down the road. Like, oh yeah, no, that's not happening.
Yeah, like
Um,
no, like
I have no idea how that's gonna turn out. That's a ticking time bomb in itself.
I genuinely read the "we're talking with Quebec" stuff to be like, this is in case Arizona does not get a deal going, because
Which
which would be
uh,
great personally. Like more Canadian teams the better, frankly, and I
yes.
would love a Quebec Montreal rivalry. Like that'd be just dope.
That'd be great
Have
for
that
the
back
sporting event
again.
to have again because they have the arena. The arena's ready to go. It's literally
Yeah,
sitting there waiting for an NHL team, and it has been for I think like 5-6 years now.
yeah. So that I'd be
Yeah,
down with that, to be honest.
yeah. I think you are right though on like the whole like on like the whole like, oh, why don't people own more teams in other locales? I think you are. Yeah, I didn't think about that aspect, especially because in particular, you know what it is. A lot of the time, uh, in sports, it's a case of when a big corporation owns the team. Generally, if they buy teams, it's for one. You're right. It's for one location, right?
Yeah,
So the biggest worry and the reason why people are so like, oh, we need to have local ownership is because every time that almost, it seems like almost every time without fail that you sell to somebody who doesn't live there, they're as soon as the going gets tough, they're like, all right, packing up, we're moving you elsewhere, we're moving this team to Vegas or something,
yeah.
right? So it's a case of like people get really like scared of the idea of any sort of like outsider people coming in to own a team if they're in case they might try and like up and take them somewhere else. In this case, obviously the Penguins are not necessarily a team anymore that's ripe for like relocation. They were not that frankly really not that long ago, back in like 08, 07. There was a lot of rumors that they were on the way out before they got their new arena.
Mhm.
But at this point it's a case of like what is Fenway Sports Group going to do? Are they going to move a second team to Boston? No, they're not going to. Why would they? They're not going to send them to the UK.
I
They're not going to do anything like that. So it's like, oh, they're clearly going to stay put in that case. So it's like, oh, you're kind of guaranteeing that they're permanent, their safety there.
Just one last thing before we call it a night. I would love if there was a two team city in the NHL. Like
Does New
I
York? Well,
think it
New
would.
York kind of counts. New York kind of counts.
Yeah, I guess like in like
in
New
like
York's
the
New
LA
York's
way, in the
huge. So
LA
like
way,
in like the LA way, right? Like where there's like you have, or like in
Lakers and the
Premier League
Clippers.
soccer where like Manchester or London has like 6 teams, right? And they all play against each other because they're all capable of funding their own stadiums. Like if Toronto had 2 teams, or if Boston had 2 teams, like I think that would be tight. New York's like a sprawling,
That
gigantic
is very true.
state,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like even though like Long Island to Manhattan is still a long way, and
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense that each would be able to fund it, but they're not like kind of that
They're very
close.
different neighborhoods. Like where the Rangers play. The Rangers playing in Madison Square Garden is a very different experience than the
The
Islanders
UBS,
playing at the new UBS Arena, which we can talk about
the
briefly as well.
UPS arena.
And even like you can also throw the Devils in there with the Prudential Center in Newark, which isn't that far away either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are all very different locales and very different places. Yeah, the NHL is not a team that, well, here's the thing. The only team that would be capable of that is right now, at least in hockey terms, is probably Toronto.
Yeah.
And that's it. But the brand is so established with the Leafs that it'd
be tough.
the amount of money you would have to pay in like competitor fees, because there's always like a fee for like basically taking over another team's territory, essentially.
Yeah.
Like you have to pay there's like a certain amount of money you have to pay to the incumbent. There's no way you could make it worth it yet. Maybe someday. Maybe
Fingers
maybe
crossed.
fingers crossed. Like that would be pretty cool. Like yeah, I would love to see I'd love to see if Vancouver just had like 6 teams. Like what if Burnaby gets a team someday? It's
Surrey.
big. Surrey gets a team. That's also an option. Like
The Surrey Jacks.
but
the logo is like, those like shitty like toy jacks where you like bounce a ball and you pick up the jacks.
Yeah. There you go. Sure. Why not?
That's what I get. Holy shit. Jalen Chatfield has 4 goals with the Carolina Hurricanes affiliate. Are you kidding me? The guy hasn't scored a goal since 2017, 2018, and he scores 6 points with the Carolina affiliate. That is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
That is nuts. The last thing to talk about was the UBS Arena. I don't know if you've seen any pictures from it or anything. Like,
no, I read a joke that the old arena had 17 toilets in it, but this one has 17 bars in it, so it's like pretty impressive.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, looking at the arena, so it's right now. So for anyone who doesn't know, this new building that the Islanders have, first of all, there you can see the whole ice from every seat. Which is an upgrade from the Barclays Center that they're playing at in Brooklyn. God, remember that? Remember them thinking, oh yeah, us moving to Brooklyn to a building that is not suited for hockey. That's a great long-term idea. Like
yeah, totally.
God, they actually were planning to do that forever, which is wild at one point, and that's wild. This new building is right next to literally the Belmont racetrack where like the Belmont Stakes happen every year. It's like the one of those 3, the Triple Crown, like 3 big horse races in the US. And like they designed it to look and to match like the feel of that racetrack and everything. And it was really funny, like looking at the pictures of the inside of the building, where it's like, it's super, like the front entrance is like super fancy. It's got like mahogany columns. Like they're like these big columns like that almost look like they're marble. There's like a ceiling that looks like
mahogany.
Like there's like a ceiling that almost looks like it's just missing the paint from like the Sistine Chapel on it, just in the way that it's designed. And I'm looking at this, and like right down to like the store, which looks like like the team store looks like an Anthropology or like one of those like Pottery Barn almost. Like, no, I'm not kidding. Go look at this thing. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking about the Islanders fan base and what their style of who they are is like us, what their style and trait signature is. And I'm like, I feel like they didn't accurately estimate what their audience likes. Like, I'm almost like, this feels like too fancy for a team that's favorite thing is tailgating. Like, I was like, like they're literally, the whole thing with the Nassau Coliseum was like, they were famous for the tailgates and people getting nuts and hyped outside the building. Right.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, this feels like they went overly fancy for like a group that like famously Long Islanders are very like rah about the blue collar aspect of the area. So it's a little interesting that they went in such a like a white class style arena, and the inside of the arena looks almost like identical to like Nassau, which is the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
And then there was like there is this one thing that I do really like where they have like basically they have like they have a wall on one end of the arena that has like logos of all like the different fan groups like across the world essentially for the Islanders, which is very cool. Like I love that idea of like, oh, if you so everyone is represented, including the people like the Islanders fans. Like I saw one for like the UK, there's one from Brazil. Like there's like all these different locations of like where people have started like their own big fan clubs in regards to cheering for the Islanders and meeting up to watch Islanders games. I think that's really cool. I think that's great. And I said my tweet was that the Canucks should do that, but it should just be all the podcasts. It should just be all the different podcasts in town just represented on a board. Like that would be very funny. That'd be real funny. Like
I'd leave the podcast so fast.
You would
be so embarrassing.
You would leave the podcast if they happen to put our logo on the wall at the top of the arena where they have like the.
Hey, maybe if they put out the new logo you designed.
The ring of honor. We're not talking about that yet. The
maybe next episode we'll talk about it.
Maybe next time. I feel maybe next time. This has been an episode. This has been a fun episode. This has been a more fun episode than I was anticipating coming into.
I think it's because we came in with the mindset of, hey, let's just like burn through Canucks talk as fast as possible, so we don't have to talk about how shit they are. And then we ended up talking about them for like an hour. So it's the way it goes. This has been a fun one for real, though, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sending in your questions as well. If you do want to send in more questions throughout the week, just throw it in our DMs, dude. You can catch me on Twitter at Cody Sievertson. My website, ahlnucksharvest.com, should be back in action starting, I think this weekend. Maybe not, though. I'm pretty sure have like a Christmas party to go to, but...
anyway. And the Canuck, the Abbey team hasn't been playing obviously because of what's going on in Abbotsford right now.
Indeed.
So there's that as well. Hopefully things are going better out there. Pretty quick. Things. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Lach and Cody. You can also check out my writing work at CanucksArmy.com, where I write at pretty frequently. I got a couple things at least coming out in the next day or two, so you should check that out. And did you already mention the Patreon, or did I forget that?
I think I mentioned it as a joke, but yes, if you want to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/thecreasecast, we've got $1 tiers, we got $5 tiers with exclusive content.
Also, go check out our merch store.
We got
it's Black Friday. It's Black Friday. We coming up Thanksgiving. If you're looking for some holiday gifts, and you want to give them the gift of CreaseCast merch, go do that. Go check that out over on a Teespring /CreaseCast, I believe. You can check that out.
Support the show, buy the merch, tell your friends, tell your parents, leave us some reviews, give us 5 stars, share us on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, folks, we'll catch you again on the CreaseCast. I have been Cody Sievertson. We'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.